In this video, I want to look at the top 10 mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they're actually picking up the computer phone to make a call. Hi, I'm Matt Elwell of the Elite Closing Academy, and in this video I want to share with you the top 10 mistakes that we see when people first move towards our trainings or purchase our book Open with a Close, particularly in the entrepreneurial space when making a sales phone call, or as I call it, using the computer phone. This is a computer with a phone on it. After yourself, it's the second most powerful tool in your business. So the first thing, or the biggest mistake that we see, is before somebody actually picks up the phone when they're unskilled, is that they use assumption and presumption before anything's actually happened. They'll use lots of general statements and phrases that can't be proven, are not true, and to be honest, it's procrastination. So here's a few to look out for. People in my industry at the moment are not spending. Like, that is an assumption. It's in fact, it's a presumption. It's got no grounding. When you say people, like, which people are you actually referring to? Where is your industry? What's the geographical location? How many names are there on the list in your industry? When was the last time you asked them all whether or not they're spending? Our job is actually to find the people that are looking to invest right here, right now, not focus on the people that are not looking to invest, and certainly not to use a generalised phrase or statement that doesn't help. And I've been there, I totally understand this. When I was 18 and a half, I used to work in the photocopying industry. I used to watch lots and lots and lots of salespeople fail. And I used to, when I first started out, I used to make all these mistakes as well. Like using assumption and presumption, things like, I know this is going to be more expensive than they want to spend. Well, how do you know that? When was the last time you saw their bank statement? When was the last time you asked them? Other little things that just don't help at all, like, I know they're going to be busy, so I'll try them at lunchtime. Like, you don't know they're going to be busy. In fact, you have no idea. So when we start to tell ourselves that assumption and presumption, wear them as a badge of truth, what happens is fear reigns and procrastination kicks in, and unfortunately you're going to fail short, medium and long term. So the first thing you've got to do is wipe the slate clean, focus on what you can do, focus on what is possible, focus on looking for those that do need it despite the global circumstances or whatever it might be. So you've got to make sure you're totally decluttered and operate from a position of complete freedom where you don't know what other people are thinking. So the best thing for you to do is to ask and let them choose the answer. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, when you do have hindering thoughts, and you will have them, the part of the brain that creates a hindering thought is the same kind of area of the brain that creates a helpful thought as well, and we can't have both at the same time. So if you are an entrepreneur that's going into a sales conversation with hindering thoughts, then actually you have a really easy opportunity and a really amazing power, which is to think of something that's more helpful. I know that sounds really easy and obvious. The truth is, if the hindering thought police are in here, they'll give you all the reasons why you shouldn't make the call. They'll tell you all the things that might go wrong. They'll tell you all the reasons why the other person's not going to want to do it. And the truth is, you can grab hold of all that and throw it away and say, right, now I've got rid of all that, what's the most helpful thought I can have right now? And it's much better to think like a child. When you think about the future, which isn't even real yet, it's much better to think about something positive and to attach yourself to a good vision. And it's a really powerful thing. So you can just say, hey, I know and I believe that when the person answers this phone, they will be ready to receive the information. They will be ready to hear exactly what it is that they need from us to take the logical next step and move away from the pain that led them to move towards us in the first place. So I think number 3 is the biggest problem that I see is a complete and utter lack of training. There isn't a system, there isn't a process, the salesperson's guessing, the other person that's receiving the call's guessing, and there just isn't any training. And I've said this in many of my videos before. I believe if you are going to get sales training, it should be me. Of course I do. You know, why wouldn't I? I've written a great book. You can get a free copy, just cover post and package, where you can start your journey to understanding my information and whether or not it's a good match for you. The truth is, whether you go with me or somebody else, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you commit to learning skills. What matters is you commit to teaching your staff and the people around you the art of great sales, of asking powerful questions, of knowing what the logical next step is, of committing to understanding, so that you can decide whether or not to present a proposal, options, and start closing. So I think that the biggest problem I see is when it comes to somebody takes on new staff. It's like, hey, here's a manual, read that, and then pick up the phone and start ringing people. Like, if you're doing that, you're setting your team up to fail. And if you haven't had training recently, then get out there, check people out. My training is professionally accredited, which means it's certified. It's part of a CPD, ongoing personal development. So I think that's a really important point. The next thing is, if there's no formal training, then there's no structure to the conversation. And I teach a 12-point structure, but also teach a higher level than that, a 3-point structure. So wherever I am in the world, wherever my team is, we follow these 3 simple steps in any sales conversation. And that is to always qualify. Second thing is to make it about them and not about you. And the third thing is after you've had a conversation, is to find out what happens next. What do we do next on this collaborative journey together? It's so important to have a structure to the call, and you can have as little as 3 things as I've just shared with you there. It's just so important that you've got a process so that you're not guessing all the time. That's why I created Open with a Closer philosophy. I think the next thing is that you must never, ever, ever, ever go into a sales conversation where you haven't decided what your outcome is. So what do I mean by that is, if you get in a car today and you type in the end destination, the car can get there, can get to the end destination. A sales conversation is exactly the same. Must have a direction of travel, an end result, so that every question you ask has context. Every question you ask could be linked to the outcome that they can get when they invest in you. And that is a game changer. It's in my book. This framework, this structure is in my book. By the way, if you haven't bought the book, it's free. You can click the link at the end of this video and just go and get the book. And it actually explains how you must have an outcome, a desired destination in every conversation you have. Point number 6 of the mistakes that we see entrepreneurs make a lot on sales calls is where an untrained, unprofessional salesperson starts to explain how it all works. In the old days, we used to call this features and benefits sales. It's a thing of the past. If you're having to explain in great detail, then you're going to lose. Your prospect should have attained enough information through their own analysis, both logical and emotional, to actually be able to answer, here's what I should be getting for themselves. And if you're having to do all the explaining, it never ever works. So it's much better to ask questions on a high level. So if somebody says to me, Matt, what do I get when I come to your 12-month academy training? I say, great question. Over 12 months, we will teach you your version of the Elite Closing Academy formula. What other questions have you got? So I don't have to go into the minutiae. I just have to give a high-level answer. Now, if somebody wants detail, of course we have to set things out in a way, a structured way, in some order and sequence, so that people can see what they get, high level, and then ask questions for the minutiae and the detail. But remember, the minutiae and the detail comes when they're on the course, when they've invested the money, when they've attached to the vision of what they're going to get at the end of using your product or service. That's when you get started, that the detail and the real minutiae comes in. So don't over-explain and don't go into the minutiae. Answer and ask, push and pull technique all the way through. Point number 7, things that we see going terribly wrong, is there are no questions involved with the sales process. It's all telling and explaining features and benefits. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work anymore. And I think it's really, really, really important that you build questions into the whole sales process. Point number 8 is, if you're going to ask lots of questions, then you better get really, really good at listening. Listening is an emotional skill. It's not logical to listen. We all want to talk about ourselves all the time, and salespeople are like the worst in the world for doing that. One of the things I teach in my book, in my trainings, is to ask a powerful question that doesn't lead them to an answer that you want them to get to. It's to ask a creative question that's open-ended enough for you then as the salesperson to commit to the information that they share with you and understand what's being said and what's not being said, and to not lead. And the only way you can do that is to listen. Now, what do you think happens to natural rapport when a salesperson gets really good at listening? It goes up. The rapport and the trust goes up between two human beings. And you'll hear sales trainers all over the world, oh, you've got to like get into rapport and ask them questions about their dog and their family. You don't have to do any of that, actually. What you have to do is commit to the truth and commit to understanding them, and ask powerful questions and commit to listening to what they say rather than prejudging or pushing it down a way that you want it to go. The yes cycle, the no cycle. This is persuasion in its nastiest form. Natural persuasion is perfectly fine, it's reasonable, it happens. But to push the conversation, to send it in a way where you benefit as the salesperson is what I call get energy. And it's something you should look to steer clear of all the time. And here's why. Point number 9, biggest mistakes we see in entrepreneurs is conflict. Whenever you're in conflict, you never win in sales. Nobody wins. The number 1 rule of great sales across the globe is to always agree. Always agree. Never, ever, ever disagree with anything, because wherever conflict it is between two parties prior to an exchange, the only thing that will get that over the line is persuasion. So it's so important to stay in agreement, stay open, avoid conflict. Actually, it's a bugbear of mine when people are trying to sell to me. I love being sold to when it's done properly. What I cannot stand is when the salesperson makes my answer right or wrong, and they start to disagree with my answer. I'm like, hey, you asked me a question, this is my answer. I'm not interested in whether or not you think I'm right or wrong. And that's a real bugbear, because it creates conflict, it creates a yes or no scenario. And we want to avoid that really at all costs during a really powerful conversation. And last but not least, the biggest mistake, the 10th biggest mistake that I see in entrepreneurs that do not understand sales over a phone properly is at the end of the conversation, it ends really neutrally, where the salesperson has no control about what happens next. I teach it as something called the logical next step. Your job at the end of every single conversation is to agree a logical next step or not at all. What we have to get rid of is things like, yeah, ring me back in 6 months and we'll have a chat then, or ring me back in the new year and we can touch base. No, you've got to get rid of that stuff. It's so important that you get really good at locking down what happens next or not at all, because it gets rid of neutral conversations. It gets rid of the whole pipeline that's just stuck. It's not good for your health. It's not good for business. It's not good for the cash flow. So always make sure that you're in control of what happens next by offering a choice to your client. When your client is in choice, you're in control. Hey, I believe from what we've talked about, the next time we speak, we should look to exchange contracts. So in between now and then, what information do you need from me so that we can make sure it happens? X, Y, Z, let me get it to you now. Now, let's agree a date. Let's lock it in. Let's have a Zoom calendar link. Let's get all of that done. Lock it down. Who else needs to be involved so the next time we speak, we can actually get the contract signed? What else needs to happen? You've got to really, really be purposeful at this point so that the next logical step is really easy and clean, and everybody knows the reason, the point of the next meeting and the outcome of next meeting. When you get really good at this, you'll find a number of things happen. Your pipeline moves, you save yourself a lot of time, and the quality of your conversations and your purposefulness, and ultimately the amount of results that you make goes through the roof. If you want to get a copy for free of Open with Close that sets out the exact framework and much more of what we just covered in this video for free, then click the link below and have your very own copy delivered to your door. If you've enjoyed this video or any of the content in it, all you've got to do is click the link to subscribe to my channel and ping the notification bell so that you get lots more free training.